Hello everybody, my name's Alan and this video is a short tribute to my cousin Charlie. For those of you who don't know, I worked with Charlie when I was about 14 for 4 or 5 years, him and his family, and I wanted to tell you a few stories that helped shape my life, and I'm grateful for knowing him. Starting at about 14, I went to work for James and Doris and worked with Charlie and Anthony and the rest of the crew in Garwood, harvesting rice every summer. One story that I always get a laugh out of my friends when I tell them is the first day or so, or first week probably, that I was working for them, I was being taught how to drive the tractor, the auger buggy as they were called. And I knew how to drive a tractor, but nothing that big. Anyway, I was also usually helping Charlie out, repair equipment, whatever went down. And that first week or so, we were changing the muffler on one of the old combines, the old 95s. And again, I was 14 or 15, and so basically I was holding wrenches and whatever Charlie needed. And we took the old rusted muffler off, and when we put the new one back on, it was a simple pipe clamp arrangement to hold it on, and it was close to the radiator or some other part of the machine that made the bolt originally hard to get to. And when we put the new one on, I told Charlie, I said, "Charlie, put this one on where the bolt is easy to get to. Turn it so that you can get to it." And he kind of chuckled a little, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, I wasn't born yesterday." And I appreciate he didn't get mad at me, but he just gave me a little understanding with his comment that I should think before I speak. That was the first kind of one of the beginning stories. And then somewhere throughout the years, again, I helped Charlie a lot of times when equipment went down. I would help him hold a tool or whatever was needed to work on it. And we were putting back together a tractor that Charlie had split apart, and I don't know if he completely rebuilt the transmission, but basically the back wheels were split away from the engine of the tractor, and we were bringing those two back together. And again, I'm helping hold the wrench and line the bolts up, and we were going around, I don't know how many bolts there are, but we were going around the tractor, tightening those up little by little to get it nice and square and straight. And I was on one side of the tractor and Charlie was on the other, and we were using fairly large bolts, and he was using a boxed-in wrench locked into another boxed-in wrench. And for those of you who've done any mechanic work, you know you do this sometimes to gain leverage to tighten or take off whatever you're dealing with. I was on one side of the tractor helping line things up and hold the wrench. Charlie was on the other. He was tightening towards me. And the wrench, where they come together, as any of you who work on this know, if it gets a little bit out of line, you lose the leverage and it kind of falls apart. So everything has to stay lined up. Well, it came out of line, and Charlie was on one side, I was on the other, and when it slipped, he was pushing really hard, and he hit me right square in the forehead with the top of the open-end wrench. And, you know, it left a little dent, and Charlie, he kind of looked at me and he said, "Maybe don't stand right there." Again, it was one of those things that happened. It was a learning experience for me. Not only did I learn not to stand in front of something like that, but I learned, if I'm working on something, to look what's going to happen if you slip. And, you know, it's one of those things that many people, many guys grow up and they learn those things from experience. But I appreciate the way Charlie handled it. Just told me, maybe don't stand right there. So that was two short stories that the one with the wrench in the head usually gets a laugh out of people. I tell that too. And I was able to talk with Charlie back in November to reminisce about those things, and he remembered that moment. And I appreciate that he remembered it, and we were able to discuss it. And the last thing, I want to say is that one of the last years I worked in the rice fields, I was working with Charlie. Instead of having the, I think 5 maybe combines that they had during many of the years I worked there, the operation had slimmed down some. They had the big 8820, I think it was, combine that Charlie drove, the big newer one, and I was in Charlie's old 95, the one with the yellow cab. Actually got a cab, that was nice. I was driving that. We were at the field near his house, near his parents' house, that is, a small field, and I was playing cleanup. I was cutting the levees and doing the small stuff that the larger combine had trouble getting to. And at some point in cutting that field, I don't know if my parents came or what, but later my mom's recounting a conversation to me that she had with Charlie about that period of time. And she said Charlie told her, he said, I like working with Alan because he doesn't break stuff. And that was one of the best comments that I ever received. And it was even better because it was spoken to my mom in reference to something I had done. I'm sorry. I appreciate it because I didn't break stuff, because I learned from Charlie and everybody I worked with, but mainly from Charlie and James, of what it meant to do a good job. And I wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to do it right, not because I thought it was the right thing to do, but because I didn't want to cause Charlie or anybody else more work. And I appreciated the way I had been treated for all of those years in working with them, and I learned a lot. So I apologize for this. I wanted to relay those few stories, and I have many others, if anybody watches this video. So is my way of, as you can see, it'd be hard for me to tell this to anybody in person. So thanks, Charlie, and I was glad to know you.